Chapter 25. Cole took a deep breath. I think Peter should come here to the island. That's not possible, Edwin said firmly, and you know that. No, I don't know that. His parents would never allow him here alone with you. Then you come and stay too, Cole countered. Peter needs to soak in the pond and carry the ancestor rock. He needs to learn how to be invisible and to dance and to carve his totem. He needs to see the spirit bear. Edwin shook his head. I have fishing season starting, and besides, I'm not sure being around you is what Peter needs. I know he's afraid of me and what I did, Cole said. He thinks I'm a monster that's coming back to him. Maybe if he meets me face to face, he'll see I've changed, and maybe he'll see that he can heal too. Edwin rubbed at his stubbed chin. How much have you really changed? Cole felt no anger, but he was tired of trying to prove himself to Edwin. He was tired of trying to prove himself to the world. There are two choices, he said. Give Peter the same chance I've had here on the island, or give up and watch him commit suicide. Which would you pick? Edwin shook his head. It's not that simple. It will be if you don't do something soon. I have changed, but Peter's parents don't know that. They'll listen to you. Maybe Garvey could come with him. What makes you think that Garvey has the time to come up here to the island to babysit you? That world doesn't The world doesn't revolve around Cole Matthews. Tears blurred Cole's vision. This isn't about me now, he insisted. This is about Peter. I don't know what else to say. That's the best idea I have. His voice broke. I screwed up, and I'm doing the very best I can out here on this island, but it won't ever be enough, will it? I can't ever change what I did to Peter, and I can't ever change how you think about me. You're right. You can't change what you did to Peter, said Edwin, his voice softer. But you have changed. He studied Cole, whose cheeks glistened with tears. He laid a gentle hand on Cole's shoulder. Whatever happens, you've changed here on the island. Both Garvey and I know that, and we're very proud of you. Before leaving that day, Edwin asked one more question. Would you be willing to stay here longer if it meant helping Peter? I'd stay my whole life if that's what it took. In the days that followed Edwin's surprise visit, Cole spent long periods standing beside the totem log, staring down at the blank space still at the bottom. His dance of anger had really been the dance of forgiveness and healing. But try as he might, he could think of no shape, form, or object that he could carve to show healing, nor could he think of any other way to help Peter. Days plodded by slowly. Cole wavered one day, hoping that Peter might come to the island. The next day, frightened of the idea. All the while, in the back of his mind, he knew he was a fool for even considering such a thing. No person in his right mind would ever go to an island in Alaska to be alone with someone who had beaten him senseless. Nearly 2 weeks passed before Edwin returned. Cole was sitting in the cabin reading a book when he heard the high-pitched whine of an outboard engine along with the deep growl of a second engine. He ran to the shoreline in time to see 2 boats round the point and enter the bay. Edwin's small skiff led the way, followed by a large green fishing trawler. Both boats plowed along, their wakes spreading out behind them like huge fans on the glassy water. Cole could see Edwin alone in the skiff. On the deck of the fishing trawler, 2 people stood together near the back. Someone else sat alone near the bow. Cole squinted. The person sitting alone on the bow looked smaller than the rest. Cole's heart raced as the boat drew nearer. It was Peter Driscoll. With the boat still 100 yards out from shore, Cole recognized Garvey's stocky bulldog figure on the helm inside the cabin, and he recognized Peter's parents. What were they doing on the boat? Garvey guided the fishing trawler to a stop a stone's throw away from shore and dropped anchor. Edwin steered the aluminum skiff alongside. In minutes, everybody had crawled into the small boat to come ashore. Everyone but Edwin wore heavy jackets and tall rubber boots. Waiting alone on the shoreline, Cole gave a hesitant wave. Only Garvey waved back. Peter sat near the back, his head down. He glanced up once fearfully, then returned to gazing down between his knees. His parents simply stared. Cole caught the bow as the boat landed. He steadied the skiff so everyone could crawl ashore. Garvey and Edwin both said hello as they climbed onto the rocks. Garvey even gave Cole a friendly slap on the back. Peter's parents nodded stiffly. Peter remained in the boat, glaring fearfully at Cole. "Hi, Peter. I'm glad you came," Cole said. Still, Peter refused to come ashore. Garvey walked over and took the bow. "Give him some space," he whispered. Cole retreated up the rocks, and finally Peter crawled stiffly ashore. Edwin helped Garvey pull the boat up on the rocks and tie the rope off to a large rock. Cole glanced nervously at the group. After being alone on the island for so long, he was uncomfortable around this many people, especially Peter. Edwin motioned everyone up to the fire pit. Peter took awkward steps as if struggling forward into a gusty wind. The rest walked in silence except for Garvey. "How've you been, champ?" he asked. "Good, I guess," Cole answered. "Been soaking in the pond every morning?" Cole nodded. "It's been too cold most of the winter. Last few weeks I've been soaking as long as I can stand it." Edwin stopped beside the fire pit and invited everyone to pull up a rock or a piece of driftwood for a seat. He worked at starting a fire. Peter pulled his chunk of wood away from everyone else and sat alone, gazing along the shoreline and out across the bay. After the fire was blazing, Edwin sat down too. "You're all a long way from Minneapolis," he said. "We're not going to pretend this is anything it isn't." Edwin turned to Cole. "I have fishing season coming, so Garvey will be staying here with you and Peter." Cole turned to Garvey. "How did you get time off?" "I have a bunch of vacation time built up, and I took a leave of absence. Coming here was something I needed as badly as you and Peter." Cole looked at Peter's parents. "Are you guys staying too?" Mr. Driscoll spoke forcefully, looking directly at Cole. "Bringing Peter here might be a huge mistake, but we had no other choice. This has been harder for us than you can ever imagine. We'll be staying until we're positive that he's safe. Nothing's going to hurt him again." Cole swallowed a lump that came to his throat. "I'll never hurt anyone again," he said. "That's a promise." Edwin leveled his gaze at Cole. "A lot has happened in the last 2 weeks. Garvey and I have lived on the phone. The circle agreed to gather again for many long hours of discussion. Mr. and Mrs. Driscoll, as well as Peter, have been forced to make one of the most difficult decisions of their life." Edwin raised a finger at Cole. "And all because of one thoughtless moment on your part." Cole nodded weakly. Edwin stood. "Tonight, Peter and his parents can sleep out on the trawler. Garvey and I will stay here in the cabin with you, Cole." Peter continued staring out across the bay. "Cole," Edwin said, "I want you to tell everyone about your time here on the island. If it takes all afternoon, I want you to show us everything you've been through. Everything from the first minute you came ashore until now." Peter's parents eyed Cole curiously, but Peter remained silent and apart, digging his toes into the mossy grass. Cole pointed to the shoreline. "It all started when Edwin and Garvey first brought me here a year and a half ago. Edwin had already built a cabin for me." With an embarrassed smile, he added, "The cabin was a lot better than this one I built, but I burned it down. I was so mad I couldn't think straight. I hated Edwin and Garvey and you guys. I hated the circle and this island and everything on it." Cole pressed his hands against his knee so that nobody would see his fingers shaking. He took a deep breath and told how, after burning the cabin down, he had tried to escape by swimming. He pointed. "That's where the first cabin was, and that's where I dragged myself to after trying to swim away from the island. The tide pushed me back to shore. I slept there in hot ashes." Cole told about seeing the spirit bear. "Edwin had told me about it," he said, "but he said they lived much farther south of here, off the British Columbia coastline. When I saw one down the shore staring at me, I tried to kill it." "Why did you want to kill the bear?" asked Mrs. Driscoll. "What had it done to you?" Cole paused, licking at his dry lips. "It made me mad that the bear wasn't afraid of me. I wanted to destroy anything that defied me. Does that make sense?" When nobody answered, Cole motioned for everyone to follow him. "Come, I'll show you where I was attacked." Everybody stood to follow except Peter. "Come, dear." Mrs. Driscoll gently coaxed Peter by pulling on his arm. Reluctantly, he got up and followed her. Again, he walked awkwardly, stumbling often. Cole showed where he had tried to kill the bear and told how he had been mauled. As best as he could, he recounted every painful memory of the next 2 days. He told how the bear had licked up his spit and how he had finally touched the spirit bear. He even told him how he ate the mouse. "That's the tree the lightning knocked down," he said, pointing to what was now only a rotting log. He found himself blinking back tears as he told about the baby sparrows. "I deserved to die," he said. "They didn't. But that was the first time I was really scared that I might die. That was when I first started thinking about my life and cared about something beside myself. And that was when Edwin and Garvey found me. Cole talked about his rehabilitation after being rescued and about returning to the island. He showed the group his scars and his bad arm. If you want, I'll show you the pond where I go to soak every morning. When Edwin nodded, Cole led the way, explaining how soaking cleared his mind. He also told about seeing the spirit bear again. When they reached the pond, Peter's father asked, "Will we see the spirit bear today?" Cole shook his head. "I don't think so. Not with this many of us here. Tomorrow morning, whoever wants to can join me for a soak in the pond. Sometimes the spirit bear comes and watches me soak." When nobody volunteered, he added with a smile, "This time of year the water is really cold." After showing them the pond and the ancestor rock, Cole headed back towards camp. The group hiked quietly, each person lost in thought. When they reached camp, Cole explained how he had built the cabin. Then he returned to the fire pit. "This is where I dance all my dances," he said. Last of all, he showed the group his totem and explained the lessons learned with each carving. When he reached the blank spot at the bottom, he hesitated. "What are you going to carve down there?" asked Garvey. Cole shrugged. "I haven't decided yet." He didn't want to talk about the uncarved space. Before Cole could change the subject, Edwin spoke up. "Why don't you tell us why you haven't decided yet?" Cole struggled to keep his voice steady as he told of the long night around the fire and his dance of anger. "My dad had beaten me my whole life," he explained. "But I know now he never meant to hurt me. He was beaten by his father, and that's all he knew." Cole swallowed a big lump that had formed in his throat. "I learned to forgive," he said. "Not just others, but also myself." He turned and caught Peter looking at him. "When I beat you up," he said, "I never meant to hurt you. It was all I knew." "You still didn't say why you haven't carved anything in the space on the totem," Edwin persisted. Cole's voice quivered. "Because the dance of anger taught me I can't heal until I help Peter to heal. He's the one I hurt." "Leave me alone," Peter blurted, turning away. "I don't want your help." Chapter 26. That evening, Cole fixed his favorite meal for everyone. As he chopped hot dogs into the spaghetti sauce, he told the group how Garvey had taught him that life was a hot dog. "Tonight will be a feast because we make it a feast," he said. As he cooked, it began raining. Everybody retreated into the small cabin, sitting crowded on the bed, chairs, and stumps that Garvey carried in. When Cole finished preparing supper, he spread the atao on the small table. He explained that the colorful blanket's special meaning. "I only use this when a night is extra special," he said. "Now, let's eat." Everyone ate off paper plates held on their laps. Peter toyed with his fork. "Honey, why aren't you eating?" asked Peter's mother. Peter looked up and blurted, "I'm not sleeping in here with him." "It's okay, son," said Mr. Driscoll. "Garvey will be here. He'll make sure that Cole won't—" "You don't have to sleep in this cabin with me if you don't want to," Cole interrupted. "That's right," Edwin said. "I've brought along a tent. Cole can sleep outside until you change your mind." Peter eyed Cole with distrust, still refusing to eat. Half an hour later, he returned to the trawler with his parents to sleep. His food sat untouched. The next morning, Cole hiked along alone to the pond. He soaked as long as he could, his calmness shaken by how terrified Peter was of him. How could he have once wanted someone to feel that way? No matter how deeply he breathed, soaking failed to take away his troubled thoughts. When he returned to camp, he found that Edwin had already brought Peter and his parents in from the trawler. They stood on the shore saying goodbye to Garvey. Cole overheard Peter arguing with his parents. "But Dad, I don't want to stay here alone with him," he pleaded. "I've already explained you won't be alone. Garvey's here. You'll be okay. This is something you must do." When Peter turned and saw Cole approaching, he turned away. Cole went on to the cabin. Before leaving, Edwin visited Cole in the cabin. "Mr. and Mrs. Driscoll decided to leave this morning," he said. "They had planned to stay longer, but realized they can't protect Peter from himself. After yesterday, I think they saw that you are no longer the problem." "He's so scared of me," Cole said. Edwin poured a last splash of coffee in his mug and took a sip. "Be as patient with Peter as we've been with you," he said. "Don't crowd him." Peter's father appeared in the doorway. "Can I have a word with you alone?" he said to Cole. Cole glanced at Edwin, then followed Mr. Driscoll outside. They walked together up into the trees where they were out of earshot of everyone else. Mr. Driscoll turned and spoke in a warning voice. You have changed some since we saw you back in Minneapolis. I'll allow you that much. But I also want to tell you, we haven't forgotten for a second what you did to our son. Not a day goes by that we don't think back to when you assaulted Peter. None of our lives will ever be the same again. Cole lowered his head. I don't like the idea of Peter being here one bit, Mr. Driscoll continued. We would never have forced him to come up here like this if we had thought there was any other choice. After his second suicide attempt, Garvey convinced us that Peter needs to face you or be haunted by his memories the rest of his life. Mr. Driscoll poked a stiff finger at Cole's chest. If you do anything to hurt our son now, God help me, you'll go to jail until you rot. Don't you understand me? Cole nodded. Mr. Driscoll, this island can help Peter. I know you still don't trust me, but that's the truth. I've warned you, Mr. Driscoll said as he turned and headed for the boat. Cole returned to the cabin. What did Mr. Driscoll have to say? Edwin asked. He just wished me a good day, said Cole, avoiding Edwin's eyes. Yeah, I'll bet he did. He has a right to be mad at me, said Cole. Edwin set his cup on the table and headed out the door. Stay up here in the cabin until we're gone, he said. I'm leaving the skiff with Garvey in case you have any problems. Cole watched through the window as everyone crawled into the skiff. Peter remained sitting on the shore. As Garvey motored out to the trawler, Peter glanced fearfully over his shoulder as if he thought someone might attack him. Even after Garvey returned to shore, Peter remained sitting by the water, staring at the trawler motor from the bay. Garvey returned to the cabin. Cole got up from his seat by the window and went to the cooler. There were only 4 candy bars left. He picked out a Snicker bar and started out the door. Where are you going? Asked Garvey. I have to try something, Cole said. He walked slowly down across the rocks towards Peter. When he was 20 feet away, the sound of his footsteps made Peter look up. Stay away from me, Peter screamed, scrambling to get up. Cole backed away. Peter, I'm not going to hurt you. He held out the candy bar. I just brought you this. Get away, Peter screamed again. Cole crouched and set the Snicker bar on a rock, then turned and retreated to the cabin. He sat down again by the window. Give him time, said Garvey. During the next half hour, Peter glanced at the candy bars several times but didn't move forward. Finally, Cole pulled out his schoolwork and began working on his math. After a full hour, he rocked back in the chair and rubbed his eyes. How are your parents? He asked. Or how are my parents? He asked. Garvey set down a book he was reading and looked up. Your mother's doing great and sends her love. Your father's filed a lawsuit to have the abuse charges against him dropped. He also filed for your custody. You mean he wants to take me away from my mom? I think it's a matter of pride. He thinks he can always get his way and doesn't want anyone or anything to win out over him. Cole traced the eraser of his pencil across the table. I used to be like that. I know you did. Do you think he'll win? Asked Cole. Garvey shook his head. Over my dead body. Cole set down his pencil. I haven't talked to you in a long time, he said. Thanks for standing by me and for everything else you've done. How can I ever pay you back? Garvey pointed towards the shore. Pay me back by not giving up on Peter. Cole looked out the window and saw that Peter was still sitting on the shore, but the Snickers bar was gone. Cole smiled. I won't give up on him. When another 2 hours passed without Peter moving, Garvey went out to talk to him. Even after coaxing, Peter refused to enter the cabin until Cole had left and set up a tent nearly 100 yards away. All afternoon, Cole sat in the tent. After dark, Garvey brought out some hot supper. How long do I stay out here? Cole asked, shivering as he wolfed down the warm food. How long does somebody stay scared when they've been beaten senseless? Garvey asked bluntly. Good night. Cole watched Garvey return to the warm cabin. Garvey and Peter were sleeping warm and comfortable in a cabin he had made with his own two hands. Here he was, sleeping in a leaky tent in the drizzle and wind, instead of starting a fire in the pit. Cole crawled into his sleeping bag and went to sleep early. When he rose the next morning, he forced himself to crawl from the warm sleeping bag and pull on his stiff, cold clothes. Before heading to the pond, he knocked on the cabin door and called softly, "I'm going to the pond. Anybody want to go with me?" "What time is it?" Garvey asked, his voice hoarse. Cole realized he hadn't looked at a clock in nearly a year. "It's time to go soak in the pond. That's what time it is," he said. Give us 5 minutes," Garvey said. "I don't want to go soak in any pond," Peter mumbled. "We'll just go along and watch," Garvey said. Cole saw a lantern flicker in the window, and he heard movement inside. Soon Garvey and Peter emerged from the cabin, both wearing their rubber boots and heavy jackets. Immediately, Cole set out through the dark, heavy mist, walking slowly so Peter could keep up. He heard the distinct shuffle of Peter's awkward footsteps behind him. When they reached the pond, Cole realized that he had forgotten to bring a towel, but it didn't matter. He could use his undershirt. He stripped and entered the frigid water. Peter and Garvey sat down on the bank to watch. It was nearly the beginning of May, but still the icy water pierced Cole's skin like millions of tiny needles. He waded in, forcing steady breaths until he reached the rock ledge on the far side. Eyes closed, he heard Garvey's muffled voice speaking to Peter on the other side of the pond, but he couldn't make out what was said. Cole soaked until his breath felt chilled. Then he waded back to shore. His body had numbed to the bone, but he didn't rush. During the last year, he had grown accustomed to the icy water. No longer did it take his breath away as it had when he first came here with Edwin. "Do you guys want to carry the ancestor rock with me?" he asked as he wiped out dry with his undershirt. "I've explained the ancestor rock to Peter," Garvey said. "We'll hike along and watch you." Cole picked up the large rock and started up the slope. He led the way, never pausing or looking back. By the time he reached the top, his bad arm ached, but he still breathed normally. Peter and Garvey both breathed hard, and heavy sweat beaded on their foreheads. "Now my ancestor rock becomes my anchor," Cole explained, setting the big rock down. He turned to Peter. "You can push it down the hill if you want." Peter shook his head. "I'll do it then," Cole said, giving the rock a hard shove. As the rock tumbled down the hill, Cole closed his eyes. "When I hear that sound, I imagine my anger leaving," he explained. He waited until the crashing rock came to a stop at the bottom, remained motionless for a moment longer, then opened his eyes and started down the slope. Nobody spoke as they worked their way back downstream. "Do you need help with anything?" Garvey asked as they arrived back in camp. "I need to collect more firewood if I'm going to be staying outside much longer." "Do you feel like helping us collect firewood?" Garvey asked Peter. Peter turned and walked to the shore and stared off at the horizon without answering. "What's his problem?" Cole said. "You," Garvey replied. "But I hope he knows we're collecting this firewood because of him," Cole whispered. Garvey answered quickly, "I hope you know that everybody's up here because of you." Cole began collecting wood. Day after day went by with no change in Peter. He refused to speak, doing whatever Garvey asked of him, but no more. He hiked along each morning to the pond, but never soaked. When he ate or walked, he moved zombie-like in slow motion. Cole quit trying to make conversation with him. Nearly 2 full weeks after Peter's arrival, they all hiked up the hill one morning with Cole carrying the ancestor rock. When he set the rock down at the top, he paused a moment to rest. Without warning, Peter reached down and gave the rock a hard shove. He stood with his lips bunched, watching until the rock crashed to a stop at the bottom. "That was a good push," Cole told him. The rest of the day, Peter remained withdrawn as usual, avoiding Cole. 3 days later, while Cole was cooking lunch in the fire pit, a rock struck the ground only feet away. Cole turned to find Peter beside the shore, pitching stones into the water as if nothing had happened. Cole looked at the stone that had almost hit him and realized his hands were clenched in fists. He never told Garvey about the stone, but he kept a close eye on Peter. The next incident occurred with Garvey along 2 days later, as they were hiking to the pond. It was early in the morning, and Cole had just jumped from one rock to another in the stream. All of a sudden, Peter bumped him hard from behind and set him sprawling into the water. Soaking wet, Cole picked himself up. He found Peter watching him with a smirk. "Why did you do that?" Cole asked. "I didn't mean to bump you," Peter said innocently. Garvey said nothing as Cole continued to the pond. "I'm skipping my soak this morning," Cole said, "because I don't have any dry clothes to change into, but I'll still carry the ancestor rock." As he turned to pick up the rock, Peter strip he discovered Peter stripping off his clothes. The thin boy stumbling into the shallow water, holding his arms above his head. He waded forward, gasping and grunting loudly. Peter never made it across to the rocks. When the water reached his chest, he turned and waded back out. His teeth chattered as he dried himself with his undershirt. That morning, after they returned to camp, Peter seemed more relaxed. He spoke to Cole without being spoken to first. "Don't you get frozen when you soak in the pond?" he asked. Cole smiled. "The first time I soaked last year, I thought my head would crack open and my toes would fall off. But you get used to it." "I don't want to get used to it," Peter muttered. He headed towards the cabin without looking back. As the days passed, the air grew warmer, but the rain came daily. Every morning, Cole hung his sleeping bag up in the cabin to dry off. "I'm going to give Edwin a leaky tent for Christmas," he complained to Garvey. Peter returned to being sullen, refusing to talk. Garvey went about each day, joking with both boys as usual. He kept delivering warm meals to Cole in the tent. Nearly a month had passed since Peter arrived on the island. Twice Edwin had stopped by to drop off supplies and to check up on them. He never stayed for long. One day a hard rain fell, and Cole stayed inside the tent. Hour after hour the steady downpour soaked through the seams, soaking Cole's sleeping bag and clothes. Mid-afternoon, Garvey brought out food. He stared at Cole, huddled with his arms wrapped around his knees. "Dang, it's cold out here, champ," he said. "I'm going back inside." "Thanks," Cole muttered. For several more hours he sat and shivered. Outside the rain kept falling, and lightning brought angry thunder to the sky. As night fell, a small stream of water trickled across the center of the floor. Everything Cole touched was wet, soggy, and cold. He prepared himself for a long night. Tonight he wouldn't sleep much. He hugged his arms to his chest and let his teeth chatter. He hadn't been this cold since he had nearly drowned trying to escape more than a year ago. Suddenly, he heard footsteps outside the tent. "It's warmer in the cabin if you want," called Peter's hesitant voice. Chapter 27. Cole needed no second invitation into the cabin. Fumbling with the zipper, he crawled from the tent and sprinted through the cold rain. When he opened the cabin door and let himself inside, Garvey greeted him with a wink. Peter was seated on the bed and eyed Cole with distrust. "Thanks, Peter," Cole said, after drying off and putting on new clothes. He heated water for hot chocolate. "Anybody else want something hot?" he asked. Garvey shook his head. "How about you, Peter?" Cole offered. Peter shrugged. When the water came to a boil, Cole made up 2 cups of hot chocolate and handed one to Peter, who took it hesitantly. "Why haven't we seen the spirit bear yet?" Peter said. Cole sat down at the table. "We will." He blew out a steaming drink. "I don't think there really is a spirit bear," Peter challenged. "I didn't think so either when I first came here," Cole said. "Even after I saw it, I thought I had just imagined it." He pulled up his sleeve to show the long scars from the mauling. "But this wasn't my imagination." "That could have been from any bear?" Peter asked. Garvey stood and stretched. "I'm hitting the sack." He pointed over by the door. "Cole, you sleep there, and Peter, you sleep in the bed." He handed Cole a rolled up piece of foam. "Here, beats the hard floor. Use one of my blankets tonight. Tomorrow we'll dry out your sleeping bag." "Thanks," said Cole. Garvey stretched out his own foam pad and positioned himself between Cole and Peter. "Whoever stokes the fire during the night gets an extra pancake in the morning," he said. "I'll do it," Cole said. He didn't mind if he had to stoke the fire for the next month. It felt so good just to be warm and dry again. As Garvey blew out the lantern, Cole pulled the blanket over himself and lay back on the foam mattress. "This sure beats a leaky tent." He glanced over into the dark towards Peter. "Thanks for letting me sleep inside," he said. "It doesn't mean we're friends," Peter grunted. In the days that followed, whenever Garvey left the cabin or walked to the stream alone, Peter took the opportunity to get back at Cole in some way. Twice he walked in his muddy boots across Cole's sleeping bag. Every time he passed by the hooks where they hung jackets to dry, he knocked Cole's jacket to the floor. At night, when he went out to go to the bathroom, he left the door standing wide open. Returning, he did the same. Cole slept the closest to the icy air and had to get up to close the door to keep from freezing. The final straw came when Cole returned from a walk alone around the bay. He found the bear carving on his totem destroyed. Someone had taken the hatchet and hacked the carving completely away. A familiar rage burned inside Cole. He confronted Peter in the cabin. "Why did you wreck my bear carving?" He tried to keep his voice calm. Peter shrugged. "You never really saw a spirit bear. Besides, what are you going to do to me? Beat me up again?" "No, I'm not going to beat you up. But can't you leave me alone?" "I suppose you've never done anything to me," Peter said bluntly. Garvey listened quietly. Cole had a sudden idea. "I know where there's another big log around the point that would make a good totem. If you want, we can drag it here for you to make your own totem." "Why would I want to do that?" "When you carve it, it gives you time to think." "I don't need to think. I need you out of my face. And besides, what would I carve?" Peter asked. "Anything you want. If you see a whale, carve a whale. If you see a spirit bear, you can carve a bear. I've learned from every animal I've carved." "There is no spirit bear," Peter challenged again. "It was just a regular black bear that hurt you. Probably an ugly one." Cole ignored the comment. "I'll help you drag in a carving log if you want." Peter shrugged indifferently, but after lunch he followed Cole and Garvey down the shore to see the log. Cole carried a rope. With the three of them working, they floated the log back along the shoreline. By dark, they had maneuvered it up beside the cabin next to Cole's totem. "So, what should I carve first?" asked Peter. "Whatever you want." "What was the last animal you saw?" asked Cole. "I saw a mouse in the cabin this morning." Cole smiled. "Then tonight we'll dance the mouse dance, and tomorrow you can carve a mouse." "I am not going to dance a dumb mouse dance," Peter said, his voice thick with sarcasm. "Every animal has something to teach us," Cole said. When Peter didn't answer, Cole motioned towards the trees. "Let's collect firewood for the dance." "You collect firewood," Peter said, heading for the cabin. "It was your idea." "I'll help you," Garvey said. Cole nodded. "I'll start the fire now so we have good coals for cooking supper." Peter disappeared into the cabin, refusing to come out until supper was ready. Then he sat out away from the fire as he sipped soup and ate one of the baked potatoes that Cole had wrapped in aluminum foil and cooked in the embers. After eating, Cole added more wood to the fire. He waited until flames licked high into the night air, then stood and approached the fire. "I'll dance first," he announced. Slowly, he moved around the fire, pretending to sniff about like a mouse. Suddenly, he scampered away from the fire as if frightened, then came back again, sniffing. Finally, he pretended to eat a full meal. When he finished, he sat down. "My mouse dance taught me that a mouse is persistent and bold," he said. "Mice are survivors that make the best of wherever they are or whatever they have." Garvey nodded. "That's a good lesson. Now it's my turn." He stood and moved around the fire. Garvey's dance seemed to mesmerize Peter, who watched closely, following every movement. After Garvey finally sat down and finished explaining that mice are often not noticed and see things others don't, Peter stood and began dancing. His moves were jerky and unsure, and he kept glancing self-consciously over his shoulder, but he continued to move. When he finished, he remained standing beside the fire without speaking. "So, what did you learn from your dance?" asked Garvey. I learned that I look like a stupid dork," Peter said sharply. He turned and ran into the cabin. Cole and Garvey remained by the fire. "He's never going to forgive me," Cole said. Garvey shrugged. "Think how much your arm and hip still hurt. Wounds of the spirit heal even slower." Cole thought about Garvey's words long after they went to bed. The next morning he went out and began carving a mouse into his long log instead of going to the pond. He didn't have the heart to carve another bear where Peter had destroyed the first one. The bear carving had taken nearly a week to finish. Reluctantly, Peter came out and began carving at his own log. By late afternoon, both boys had carved mice into their logs. Cole couldn't believe how real Peter's carving looked. "That's unbelievable," he said. "Where did you learn to carve?" "I think my mouse looks better than yours," said Peter. "It does," said Cole, "but carving a totem isn't a competition. Saying your carving is better is like saying your feelings are better." Peter smirked. "Mine are." He turned to Cole. "Did you really see a spirit bear?" Cole nodded and told him he had pulled a handful of white hair from the bear that mauled him and then had thrown it away. "The only reason I always had to prove things was because I knew I was a liar," he said. "Threw the white hair away because I decided I was tired of lying." Peter studied Cole as they went to the cabin for lunch. He sat quietly through the whole meal. After lunch, he returned to his log to keep carving. "I want to be by myself," he told Cole. Cole and Garvey looked at each other, but agreed to take a long hike outside the bay to look for whales. It was nearly dark by the time they returned. Hiking back around the bay in the gathering dusk, Cole could see Peter still carving, but not on his own log. "That jerk!" Cole said. "He's messing with my totem again. Hey!" he screamed, breaking into a run. "What are you doing?" Peter stepped back from the log as Cole came running up. Cole stared down, dumbfounded. In the same spot where the bear carving had been destroyed, Peter had almost completed another bear. The new carving was so real, the bear looked as if it were stepping out of the log. "That is incredible!" Cole exclaimed. "Hope you didn't mind," Peter said. "Could you teach me how to carve like that?" Cole asked. Peter shrugged. "Depends on if you want to learn." He turned away and headed into the cabin. Chapter 28. It's our last chapter. As summer came to the North Country, group visits to the pond had become a daily event, until the day Peter announced, "This morning, just Cole and I should go." Garvey had already pulled on his pants. "Are you sure?" he asked. Peter nodded. Garvey turned to Cole. "What do you think?" Cole eyed Peter and shrugged. "Doesn't matter to me." Again, Garvey asked, "Are you guys sure you're ready for this?" "Yes," Peter said, his voice firm. Cole nodded, but found himself a little scared. "Okay, have a good soak," Garvey said. Cole packed the towels in his backpack. He paused, then slipped in a towel. He and Peter let themselves out the door into the breaking dawn and worked their way along the shore. Neither of them spoke as they reached the river and started wading upstream towards the pond, but stumbled along angrily, his fists clenched. An awkward and thick silence hung between them. When they finally reached the point, Cole couldn't stand the silence anymore. "I'm glad we came alone," he said. "It's time we were friends." He held out his hand to Peter, but Peter knocked him away. "I'll never be friends with you." "Look, Peter, I didn't mean to hurt you." Peter shoved Cole, knocking him off balance. "You beat me up and smashed my head on the sidewalk until I was bleeding. They had to pull you off of me. What do you mean you didn't mean to hurt me?" His eyes were wild. Cole had regained his balance. "What I mean is, I didn't mean to get so angry. I didn't decide all of a sudden to get mad and hurt you. And so now everything is supposed to be all right?" Peter shoved Cole again with both hands. "No, it's just that everything will be better when my headaches go away, when I sleep at night and my bad dreams quit." Peter's eyes welled up with tears. "I can't walk anymore without stumbling. Sometimes I can't think straight, and my words don't come out right." He shook a fist in Cole's face. "You don't really care about me. You just want to get off this island. That's all you want." "A year ago that was true," Cole said, "but not anymore." "You haven't changed," Peter challenged, his voice growing louder. "You would beat me up again if you had the chance." Cole shook his head. "I could beat you up right now, but I won't." "You wouldn't, 'cause you're scared of Garvey," Peter said, "and 'cause you're scared of jail." Again Cole shook his head. "It's because I've had a lot of time to think. And besides, if you thought I might beat you up again, why did you tell Garvey you wanted to come alone with me this morning?" Peter bent down, pretending to tie his boot. "You have to believe me," Cole pleaded. "I'll do anything to help you and make things right. It doesn't do any good to stay mad." Suddenly, Peter sprang up, shoving Cole hard and sending him stumbling to the ground. "Stay away from me! I don't need your help!" he screamed. "I'm so sorry," Cole repeated. "You're not sorry for anything," Peter shouted. He kicked all the ground, pelting Cole with gravel and dirt. Shielding his face, Cole got to his feet. But Peter stormed forward and shoved him again. "Why don't you beat me up again? I don't care anymore." Cole quietly stood his ground. "Maybe you're scared of me," Peter said, swinging his fists. He struck Cole squarely in the face. "Go ahead, hit me," he taunted. "Kill me, I don't care anymore." "You do care," Cole said, shielding his face. "I'm not ever going to hurt you again. Can't you see that?" "Liar!" shouted Peter. He hit Cole hard in the gut. "You're scared of me." When Cole refused to fight back, Peter grew bolder. Again and again he struck Cole with his bare fists. Cole raised his arms to try to ward off the blows, but he didn't fight back, nor did he run. This only made Peter angrier. He hit harder. As the blows pummeled him, Cole's own anger smothered. He grabbed deep breaths. He would not get angry, not now. As he tried to back away, he stumbled and fell. Peter was on him instantly, hitting and yelling. All Cole could do was curl his knees up to his chest and try to cover his face. Then Peter started kicking him. To Cole it felt as if a sledgehammer was striking his chest and arms. He rolled away, but the next kick caught him in the face and slammed his head back. He tasted blood. The world spun in lazy circles. The hammer kept hitting. "Stop!" Cole gasped. "Please stop!" "Then fight, you coward!" Peter screamed like a madman. "I'm not going to fight you," Cole shouted as the next angry kick to the stomach took his breath away. Then the kicking stopped. Cole opened his eyes in time to see Peter sink to his knees next to him, crying. Peter's body shook with great hiccuping sobs. "Are you okay?" Peter asked, grimacing from pain. "I'm scared," cried Peter. "I'm so scared. My thinking gets all mixed up, and I feel like the whole world is falling on me." Wincing, Cole sat up. "How can I make you believe that you don't ever have to be scared of me again?" "You just say that," Peter sobbed. "Peter, I'm not a bad person. I got mad at you because I was really mad at myself. I thought my dad beat me because I was worthless." Cole paused. "The dances, carving the totem, carrying the ancestor rock, touching the spirit bear, it was all the same thing. It was finding out who I really was." "You're a jerk," Peter sobbed. "That's what you are." Cole fought back his own tears. "I'm part of some big circle that I don't understand. And so are you. Life, death, good and bad, everything is part of that circle. When I hurt you, I hurt myself too. I don't think I'll ever heal from what I did to you, but I'm sorry, Peter. I really am sorry." Peter knelt, crying, his body bent forward. Cole, not knowing what else to do, wrapped his arms around Peter's shoulders. For a long time, Peter let himself be hugged, leaning back into Cole. And that was when it appeared. Not 20 feet away, it stood watching them, the spirit bear. "Look," Cole whispered, letting go of Peter. Peter still sniffed, staring back at the ground. "Look," Cole whispered louder, nudging him. "It's the spirit bear." Peter raised his head and stared, his mouth open in amazement. "Will it hurt us?" he whispered. "No," Cole whispered back. "We're not threatening it. You and I have both become invisible." Peter looked at Cole, puzzled. "Never mind, I'll explain later," Cole whispered. For a full minute the bear stood frozen in place, gazing at them. The chattering of a squirrel nearby echoed like thunder in the silence. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the spirit bear swung its massive head around and ambled away, vanishing ghost-like into the trees. Peter drew in a deep breath as if waking from a long sleep. "Did we really see what I think we just saw?" Cole smiled and shrugged. "They say there aren't any spirit bears here." "But I saw one," Peter insisted. "Will anyone believe us?" "Doesn't matter what other people think or believe," Cole said. "It's what you believe, that's what's important." That morning, as Cole and Peter soaked, a warm silence blanketed the pond. Afterwards, they found a second ancestor rock so both could roll their anger down the slope. When they headed back to camp, Cole's face was swollen, and he hugged at his sore rib with an elbow. "Are you sure? Are you okay?" Peter asked. Cole licked at his numb and swollen lips and grimaced. Still he smiled. "I'd hate to go through that again." Peter walked without speaking. When they arrived back in camp, Cole broke the silence. Standing beside the totems, he explained to Peter that being invisible was being a part of life's circle and accepting it. "This morning, when we forgave each other, we also forgave ourselves," he said. "We allowed ourselves to become a part of the big circle. That's why we saw Spirit Bear." "What makes you think I forgave you?" Peter said. Cole pulled off the backpack. "I have something I want to give to you," he said. He took out the folded atau. "Garvey gave this to me as a symbol of friendship and to show he trusted me." He handed the atau to Peter. "Now I want you to have it." "Are you saying you trust me?" Peter asked. Cole nodded. "I hope someday you'll trust me." Peter stared at the atau as he spoke. "I want to help you carve the blank space on your totem, the space you saved for your dance of anger." Cole hesitated. "Okay." He ran to the cabin and returned with the knives. For the next 2 hours, Cole and Peter carved together. When they finished, Cole hollered for Garvey to come from the cabin and take a look at the nearly perfect circle that now completed the totem. When Garvey joined the boys, he stared down at the log and at what they had carved. "You carved a perfect circle," he said, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "Why a circle?" Cole and Peter glanced nervously at each other, neither wanting to speak. "Could it be because every part of a circle is both a beginning and an end?" Garvey asked. "And everything is one?" Peter shrugged awkwardly and grinned at Cole. "A circle is all I could teach him to carve." Cole smiled and nodded. "I'm a slow learner, but I'm working on it." Author's note: Circle justice has been practiced by native cultures for many centuries. Only recently has the concept been given a chance to work within some modern U.S. judicial systems. It may be argued that a beating victim would never be sent to an island to face his attacker, as it is portrayed in this novel. The strength of circle justice, however, comes from the creativity of the individual members within each healing circle. I would hope that in real life, any healing pain would remain a possibility. Spirit bears actually do exist off the coast of British Columbia. I've refrained from describing exactly where they are in an attempt to preserve their threatened privacy and habitat. During the research for this book, however, a 300-pound male spirit bear actually approached to within 20 feet of where I stood. It was indeed a magnificent sight, one worth preserving for future generations.